Isn't it a great day to be a Christian? Open your Bibles to the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7. For the last several Sunday evenings, we've been looking at the book of Ecclesiastes. And this is a book that should make all of us pause and think deeply about how our life is going, how we're living, how we should be living in a world that doesn't always make sense. And it didn't make sense to the wise man Solomon either. So far in our study of Ecclesiastes, we've seen how the preacher, that everybody pretty much agrees that Solomon shared his search for the meaning of lives in chapters 1 and 2. And then in chapters 3 through 6, we saw observations he made about his search. And he repeated the same two conclusions over and over again, that life under the sun is vain. And still, there's good that can be done as long as we understand that our blessings come from God. We use them to His purpose. And he shared his experiences under the sun and his observations and gave us some things to think about. For example, he talked about the value of friendship and how we're supposed to approach God in worship. Now, starting in chapter 7, and for the remainder of this book, Solomon's going to give us some proverbs, some wise sayings, some thoughtful narration to help us know how we can live a pleasing life before God. In the passage we're looking at tonight, he gives us a string of wisdom sayings, and he points out over and over that some things are better than other things. So let's read this passage together, and as we read it, be looking for comparisons that are pointed out in these 12 verses. Ecclesiastes 7, verse 1. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. It's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. Say that not thou, what is the cause that the former days were better than these? For thou dost not inquire wisely concerning this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, and by it there is profit to them that see the sun. For wisdom is a defense, and money is a defense, but the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom giveth life to them that have it. Hopefully, as you read through this, you notice the word better came up over and over again. In life, there are some things that will help us be better than other things. And tonight, we're going to look at what we need to do to be better. And Solomon pointed out 5 places where we need to make sure that we've got our values straight. And so we'll look at 5 different values tonight. First of all, we should value character over cosmetics. First line in the first verse, he says, a good name is better than precious ointment. A good name, he's talking about your reputation. He's talking about your integrity, about how other people remember us. In the ancient world, ointment was an extreme luxury. It was only possessed by the very wealthy. But Solomon says that good character is worth more than precious ointment. Proverbs writer said in Proverbs 22:1, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. Why is a good name better? Solomon's already pointed out in the previous chapters the vanity of wealth. He said, unless you value your possessions as blessings from God and use them to serve God's purposes, then they're worthless. He says we're all eventually going to die, and you can't take those treasures with you. And when you leave them behind, the person that gets them may be foolish, and they may waste them. On the other hand, a good reputation finds honor before God and men, and the benefits of a good name last beyond the grave. We all want to find our name in the Lamb's Book of Life. Solomon says we need to value a good name. Gaining wealth can be done in many ways, and some of them are even sinful. However, getting a good name means that you live before man in a way that brings recognition to you. And as a result of that, it brings honor to the God that we serve. And so Solomon says that we should serve trying to receive a good name. And then in a kind of a jarring statement at the end of verse 1, he says the day of death is better than the day of one's birth. Of course, now that assumes that you've made a good name. If you haven't made a good name, then the day of death is not going to be a good day. But at death, your character is complete. Your story is told. There's nothing you can do to change your name once you die. So how is your death better than one's birth? Well, the day of your birth is the beginning of all your worldly sorrows. Let's consider the wisdom of Job. Go to Job chapter 3. Job chapter 3, verse 2 says, And Job spake and said, Let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, There is a man-child conceived. Let that day be darkness, let not God regard it from above, neither let the light shine upon it. Job said, I wish I'd never been born. I go to Job chapter 14. Look at the first verse. It says, Man that is born of a woman is of a few days and full of trouble. Worldly trouble begins at birth. We have problems that start when we come into this world. Jesus said that even the righteous people are going to have trouble. Go to the book of John. Jesus is talking in John chapter 16, and he says this, These things have I spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation. But be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. Look at that last part. Jesus said, I have overcome the world. That's why the end of this world is a good day, because Jesus overcame the world. We're not of this world. We sing this world is not our home. And for the righteous, the day of one's death is the beginning of eternal bliss. That's the beginning of our time with God. Revelation 14:13 says, And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Write, Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. If we followed Christ and we made a good name for ourselves, when this life is over, that's the beginning of rest. The day of our death is the start of eternity with God. Solomon is speaking of the day of one's death, and that leads us to the next bit of counsel. Go to Ecclesiastes 7 verse 2. It says, It's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to their heart, to his heart. It's better to go to the house of mourning than the house of feasting. Funerals teach us more than parties do. We learn more when we come together over somebody's death than we do when we go someplace to have a good time, to have a feast, because funerals remind us of eternity. They remind us that we need to reflect. We may need to reevaluate. We may need to repent. The wise man knows he really can't avoid sorrow, so we let sorrow shape us. We learn from our sorrow, from our misfortune, and we try to change it. The wise man understands that death is the end of all men. Everybody's going to go through that. Funeral reminds us that life is brief and death is certain. We're all going to die. Funeral forces us to face reality and to prepare for it, to be ready for what's to come. Think about your legacy. What will people say when you're gone? What will God say? Verse 3 says, Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance the heart is made better. Sorrow is better than laughter. That sounds illogical. That's not something we think about. I like laughing. I like having a good time. But what Solomon's trying to say is laughter has its place, but sorrow can make our hearts better. Hebrews 12:11 says, Now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Hebrew writer is saying you learn more from your trials than you do from your good times. We don't like being chastised. We don't like people telling us we're doing things wrong, but that helps us be better. That helps us improve. That makes us better people. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 4 says, The heart of the wise is the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. Laughter brings us temporary relief from the burdens of life, but sorrowful times encourage us to make positive changes. When we go through things that make us sad, why am I sad? What have I done? What can I do differently? What can I do to improve? Having good character is better than having good appearance. Being good is better than looking good. Let's go to the second point. Solomon points out the value of rebuke over entertainment. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 5 says, it's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the songs of a fool. Today's world, we run from correction. You can't judge me. You can't tell me how to live my life. You ever hear that? We don't want to hear that. We don't want to be corrected. We don't want people telling us what we need to do. And that was true in the first century church as well. We turn to Galatians chapter 4. Galatians 4, Paul is confronting some Christians that have fallen back into their old ways, their old practices. They should have left these things behind, but they didn't. Galatians 4:11, Paul says, I'm afraid of you, lest I have bestowed upon you labor in vain. Paul's asking, if I wasted my time teaching you, didn't you learn anything? Don't you know what you're supposed to be doing? I told you that you're not supposed to act this way anymore. So he needs to reprimand them. And he knew that they didn't want to hear that. They weren't going to receive that well. Down in verse 16, he says, am I therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth? Ever make you mad sometimes when somebody tells you the truth? That's not what I wanted to hear. I want you to brag on me. I want you to tell me I was doing good. Instead, you told me the truth. We shouldn't let that make people our enemy. We shouldn't be mad at people that tell us the truth. Instead, it says that people, instead of hearing the rebuke of the wise, they want to hear the song of fools. We surround ourselves with noise, with distraction, with entertainment. We want things that make us feel better. And Solomon calls those the songs of fools. Wise rebuke, though it sting, can save your life, can save your soul. We need to listen to rebuke. Verse 6 says, for as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Now, it's been a while since we've been camping, but I remember when we build a campfire, first you put leaves and little twigs and things on there because they catch fire quicker and they burn, but they make a lot of noise. They make a lot of racket. Now they're used for kindling. They get the fire started, but you put bigger things. You put bigger logs. You put a lot more wood on there before you start cooking anything because that kindling is not very good for that. In this case, the twigs, the leaves, or the thorns may burn. They may make a lot of noise, but they're not going to generate a lot of heat. You wouldn't try to cook a meal over a fire of blackberry vines. That wouldn't provide enough heat. Solomon compares that to the laughter of a fool. It's easy to get started. It makes a lot of noise. It just doesn't do much good. It doesn't accomplish the task. There's not substance to it. Who do you allow to speak into your life? Who do you listen to? Do you want people that are just saying what a good job you're doing and bragging on you all the time? Or do you listen to people that care about you and want to correct you? God uses truth speakers, wise counselors, parents, friends, others to guide us, to help us be better people. We need to be open to those. We need to listen to that wise counsel. Point number 3, Solomon points out the value of patience over pride. Go back to Ecclesiastes 7. Let's read verses 7, 8, and 9. He says, surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. Now, I don't know about you, but verse 7 for me wasn't really easy to understand. In fact, I kept reading it over and over again. I went back and read it in several different English translations, and the clearest explanation I could find was in the New English translation. Verse 7 there says, surely oppression can turn a wise person into a fool. Likewise, a bribe corrupts the heart. We're going to face tribulation. We're going to have problems. We can either worry about it and fret over it and let it drive us crazy, or we can deal with it. Oppression can make us fools. It can drive us out of our mind. We can't give in to that. Also, we can't give in to the temptations of the world and allow ourselves to be bought off. We need to serve God and do His will. We got to maintain our faithfulness. Then verse 8 says, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Starting something's easy. Finishing well is hard. But finishing well is what counts. A lot of projects start with good intentions, but then people just don't follow through. They don't carry on. They don't complete the job. It's when they finish that we can look back in satisfaction over something. Go to the 126th Psalm. Psalm 126, verse 5, points this out. It says, "They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him." I don't think there's any better example of patience being rewarded than gardening. When you start, that's not a happy time. There's a lot of work. There are hours of preparing the soil and planting the seeds and pulling the weeds and hoeing out the grass. Have you ever seen a garden where the gardener just gave up? I mean, they started good and then they just got tired of messing with it and they let the weeds take over the garden. We've driven by some places and it's just like that. It's a sad sight. It started good, but the end of it is better. It's how you finish that matters. When you keep working, when you're willing to put forth the effort, there's great reward. I don't think there's anything I like better than eating a fresh homegrown tomato. That's a great reward, but I'm not really excited about my tomatoes right now because I spent hours and hours and hours of getting the soil ready and planting them and putting the baskets around and getting the mulch down and all the things that go with it, but it's because I'm working toward the reward. Our primary concern should be how things turn out in the end, not how we start. The rest of that verse says, "And the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Patience is better than pride." Patience is a virtue. Throughout the Bible, there are passages talking about the virtue of patience. Let's look at one in the Psalms. Psalm 37. Begin reading in verse 7. It says, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Cease from anger, forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil, for evildoers shall be cut off, but those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth." Patience. Patience is a virtue. Patience is to be pursued by those that are seeking to do the will of God. Pride, on the other hand, is of the world. Go to 1 John chapter 2. 1 John chapter 2, John writes about pride, and he says this, "For all that is of the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world." We don't want to be of the world. We want to be seeking the will of God. Jesus said in Mark chapter 7 that pride can defile us, that pride is evil. Mark 7 verse 21 says, "For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy." What's listed with all those other evil, sinful things? Pride and foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile the man. Pride leads to destruction. Probably one of the most frequently misquoted verses in the Bible is Proverbs 16:18. You've heard people say, "Pride goeth before a fall." And that's what the verse means, but that's not what it says. Proverbs 16:18 says, "Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." Pride is evil. Pride brings us down. Patience is necessary for salvation. Hebrews 10:35 says, "Cast not away therefore your confidence, which hath great recompense of reward, for ye have need of patience, that after ye have done the will of God, ye might receive the promise." God's people need to be patient. We need to patiently wait on the Lord. Patience is the fuel for long-term faithfulness. That's what helps us keep going. And patience can prevent us from becoming angry. Let's go back to Ecclesiastes chapter 7, this time verse 9. "Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry." Now look carefully at this last part. "For anger resteth in the bosom of fools." You ever been around somebody that just seemed to hold on to their anger? They were bitter and they seemed to enjoy it. It's what fueled them, what made them go on. Anger is often pride in disguise. It says, "I know better. I deserve better. How dare you treat me this way?" And people get that anger built up and then they say and do the wrong things as a result. The wise are slow to anger, quick to listen, and rich in patience. You ever find yourself in a situation where you're tempted to give up too soon? Ask God for patience, endurance, and humility. Point number 4, the value of the present over nostalgia. Ecclesiastes 7:10 says, "Say not thou, what is the cause that the former days were better than these? For thou dost not inquire wisely concerning this." You ever find yourself reminiscing about the good old days? I think about the good old days. I remember the good old days when we didn't have any indoor plumbing in our house. I remember the good old days when school didn't start till after Labor Day, but it was because it was so hot and there wasn't any air conditioning in our school building. We were all miserable. I read last week, someone wrote this. It said, the world wasn't really better back when you were young. You just weren't smart enough to notice all the problems yet. Okay? The opposite can also be true. People get caught up so much in the bad things that happened to them in the past that they can't enjoy today. They're still focused on the old days. They never get over what somebody did to me, what they said to me. There are churches that are still split, even though the reasons for their division have gone away. The people just can't get over. I can't go back with them. I can't get over what they've done. I can't forget. We don't need to focus on the past, whether it's good or whether it's bad, because there's nothing we can do to change the past. We need to live in the future. We need to live in the present. We need to be doing today what we can to make tomorrow better. We need to live today and say, what's God doing now? What does God want me to be doing now so that my future will be better? We may neglect opportunities for doing good in the present because we're still focusing on the past. Go to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4. Paul's writing to the church in Philippi, and there's two sisters there that are fussing with each other. Now, we don't know what they're fussing about. I'm not sure I can even pronounce Euodias and Syntyche correctly. I sure don't know what they were fighting about, and Paul didn't say. Pretty sure it wasn't anything doctrinal, because if it had been, Paul said, this is wrong and this is right, and he would have explained it. These women weren't getting along, and Paul wrote and said, y'all need to fix this. He didn't say, now dig up and find out what it was that started all this and find out who was right. Here's what he said instead. Philippians chapter 4, verse 3, he said, and I entreat thee also, true yokefellow, help those women which labor with me in the gospel, with Clement also, and with other my fellow laborers, whose names are in the book of life. He said, these are our Christian sisters. These are former workers, missionary workers. They've been trying to spread the gospel. They don't need to keep fighting, so help them. And then he wrote what they needed to do instead. Verse 4, rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. He said, if you live like this, you won't be fussing and fighting. You're seeking God's will instead of your own will. And then he finishes it off saying, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you. He didn't say think about what went on before. He said do this now, and you'll have peace. Don't get stuck in the past, either in regret or in glory. Rejoice in the Lord. Focus on his blessing. God gives us grace for today. Ask him what he wants you to be doing. Point number 5, the value of wisdom over wealth. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 11, wisdom is good with an inheritance, and by it there is profit to them that see the sun. For wisdom is a defense, and money is a defense, but the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom giveth life to them that have it. In all the previous chapters we've read of Ecclesiastes, Solomon has already talked about the vanity of riches, but here he said there are some advantages to having some money. He said in verse 12 that money is a defense. Proverbs 10:15 says the rich man's wealth is his strong city. You can use money to help yourself. You can have a roof over your head. You can put locks on your door. You can do things to defend your home and your possessions because of your money. We all know the wisdom of saving up for a rainy day. If you've ever read or listened to anything that Dave Ramsey puts out, he talks about the value of having an emergency fund. Money can be good to help us get through. In fact, money can attract friends. Proverbs 14:20 says, the rich have many friends. Money is needed for survival. Money can make us popular. But Solomon's saying that wisdom is better than money. People can have money without having wisdom, but they probably won't have it very, very long. Wisdom and money should be used together. Money is our defense. Money can protect us in the world, but it can't save our soul. Proverbs 11:4 says, riches profit not in the day of wrath, but righteousness deliver from death. Wisdom can protect you and your legacy. Wisdom gives life to them that have it. It's not talking just about an existence here. He's talking about riches and depth and purpose in life. Wisdom comes from God. Psalm 111:10 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Money can be good, but money can also bring on evil. It can create problems. Most problems in marriages begin in fusses over money. Businesses fold because people can't handle their money. Paul wrote to Timothy that the love of money is the root of all evil. Money can cause problems, but wisdom brings peace and joy. In fact, James tells us we should pray for it. He said, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. We need to pray for God to send us wisdom. There's nothing wrong with having money, but wisdom is so much better, and having both of them is the best of both worlds because it'll help us use what we have wisely. Ecclesiastes 7, verses 11 and 12 remind us that wisdom is found in places that we don't always look. You can find wisdom in mourning. You can find wisdom in rebuke. You can find wisdom in patience and in fearing God. Lord willing, we'll look at the rest of this chapter next Sunday evening. Life is brief, the end will come, but if we live wisely with a good name, with listening hearts, if we're slow to anger, if we're focused on trying to do God's will, then not only will we live well, we'll die ready. But the only way to die ready is you need to be a Christian. It's the only life worth living, the only death one would dare to die. If you've never obeyed the gospel, you can do that tonight. If you are a Christian, have you thought about how you're living your life? Are you looking for what's better? Are our values the same thing that God wants them to be? You need to make some changes tonight. Won't you do it right now as we stand together and as we sing?